Our childcare system is facing collapse. Already, it's incredibly inaccessible for people, right? There are so many more kids that need slots than for every slot. In a lot of parts of the states, it's three or more kids for every one slot that's available. And then even if you do get a slot, the cost is unaffordable for parents. And, I had my first kid 11 years ago. I had to get on the wait list years before I was pregnant to get an infant slot.
Yeah.
And with my most recent baby, we had two kids in college at the University of Minnesota. It cost less to send those two, my stepdaughters, to college than to send our one baby to daycare as an infant.
Wow. Next
Right?
guest happens to be a Wisconsin state senator representing the 26th district here for much of the city of Madison, the University of Wisconsin-Madison amongst them. She is a member of the Joint Committee on Finance, and as the song said there, played by Zommers, happens to be a Swiftie mom as well. How cool are you, Senator Royce? Thanks for being here. How are you?
Well, maybe cool for the Senate, not cool according to my kids. And that's, I think, what matters.
Well, yes, at home, absolutely.
Yeah.
Senator Kelda Roys is our guest. Senator, always glad to have you on. I appreciate you making this effort through the committee process, the budget process for JFC, and kind of cool. Our world headquarters are a block away from the Capitol. But not a lot going on in the Joint Finance Committee now, for the second week in a row?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we are at this point, we should be knee deep in the budget process. But the Republicans can't seem to get their act together on even kind of straightforward agencies where we haven't been noticed for any hearings this week. And they said they were going to give us 72 hours notice, which puts us already at Thursday afternoon. So likely we weren't in last week. We're probably not going to be in this week. I don't know when we're going to pass this budget. I mean, if we're not even getting to it before Memorial Day, we're going to have a very difficult time meeting the needs of our local governments and school districts and passing that budget by the statutory deadline.
Not necessarily unprecedented, but I think it's fair to say maybe unusual to go a full 2 weeks this time of year without any meeting at all.
Very, very unusual. And I think, there isn't really a good reason for that other than just the internal politics of the Republican caucus. They just can't get together on this. They can't agree.
That's what fascinates me as a former Republican, that my former party just can't seem to get their stuff together. We'll keep it clean for radio, Todd. But I find it fascinating when they have the control and remind people the makeup of this. There's only 4 members, correct, of the minority party on JFC.
That's right. Yeah, it's 12 members of the majority Republican Party and 4 Democrats. So it's not like it's close. Like they could afford to lose a couple members on some of these votes if they needed to, but that's just not how they've operated. They don't allow any dissent within their caucus. So whatever they do in that closed room, they just come out there in lockstep.
Which seems odd to me again. And we've heard stories. I know my colleague Jane Matnier on her show has talked about this, that, and full well, but for our listeners that might not know the process, these meetings tend to be long. That's not unusual. Right. But we had a couple here that drove all the way from Barron, almost 4 hours last week to come down to talk about childcare with their elected officials. And at least the assembly was in session and that individual was here, and they would not even meet with the constituent. As someone who served as a staffer in that building for a long time, I just find it abhorrent that, I guess I'll ask it to you. The commute for your district is pretty short, but if you have someone from your district that wants to at least say hello, my guess is you probably do everything you can to take time for that.
I do. And, I'm often double and triple booked because I'm on multiple committees. But I think that making sure that your constituents get to see you and talk to you and yell at you or shake your hand or whatever it is a core part of the job. And it's really disappointing. My office actually ends up responding to a lot of people and they say, we didn't hear back from our representative. We've emailed, we've called. The only person who wrote back was you. And, you don't even represent anywhere near our district. Yeah. But I think people deserve to be heard.
I do too. And again, this issue of not meeting for now is seemingly going to be 2 weeks.
Yeah.
When we have issues like childcare, and again, for our listeners that weren't with us on Friday, as I understand it, Senator Royce, to help me, correct me if I'm wrong, that this was already a problem that childcare folks were facing prior to the pandemic.
Oh, yes.
Pandemic comes along. Federal money comes in to help, but basically becomes a Band-Aid. Now the federal money isn't going to be there, and now Bob Lang at the Fiscal Bureau estimating we're still at $4 billion plus in state surplus money. It would seem to me that there should be some dollars to make up for that loss of federal aid.
Absolutely. I mean, our childcare system is facing collapse. Already, it's incredibly inaccessible for people, right? There are so many more kids that need slots than for every slot. In a lot of parts of the states, it's 3 or more kids for every one slot that's available. And then even if you do get a slot, the cost is unaffordable for parents. And, I had my first kid 11 years ago. I had to get on the wait list years before I was pregnant to get an infant slot.
Yeah.
And with my most recent baby, we had 2 kids in college at the University of Minnesota. It cost less to send those 2, my stepdaughters, to college than to send our one baby to daycare as an infant.
Wow.
Right? And, and parents just can't afford it.
What our guests on Friday from Barron County said they heard from Republicans in the state capitol, and I believe, I'm staying corrected, but I believe at least one was on the Joint Finance Committee. They looked at this couple, how much they're charging per student in Barron, and put the blame on the provider and said, well, you have a bad business plan. You can't be charging that low of a rate and still make it. And they said, that's all. You can't charge the prices that folks do in Madison or Milwaukee because the folks in Barron don't have that high income. If we
Right.
charge a higher rate, we're going to be out of business and our clients will have nowhere to go.
That's right. I mean, what Republicans are really saying is having kids is something that only the wealthy should be able to do, right? And also that investing in that time of life when 90% of brain development happens for birth to 5, that we just don't care. We have no interest as a state in supporting that. And to me, that is crazy because we understand as a society that it benefits all of us for every kid to have a good public education. That's good for us. It's good for our economy, for our society, keeps them out of trouble. That's why we have public higher ed, because we want smart people to have the opportunity to live the life that they want. Why don't we do that? And the most expensive and the most crucial time of childhood, birth to 5, to say nothing of the fact that we need those parents in the workforce and they want to be in the workforce so they can support their families.
We're talking with State Senator Kelda Roys here of the 26th District in the Dane County area, most of the city of Madison here, certainly on the west side, talking about her role in the Joint Finance Committee. Senator, you also serve still on the committee that oversees higher ed in the state of Wisconsin? Or are you off that now?
I'm off that now, but I still obviously follow it closely because I'm very passionate about higher ed.
Well, you represent the flagship University of
do.
Madison, which I got my Motion W hoodie on. Mom would be disappointed. She doesn't like me wear a hoodie on the air, but I'm representing UW, Mom. I'm very passionate about it, as you know. I know there was an article in the Milwaukee Business Journal over the weekend, and President Rothman of, I still call it the EW system, says Milwaukee business groups back, they now call it University of Wisconsin, calls for increased public funding. I find this interesting, Senator, because business folks are not, quote unquote, left wing softies. They're about job creation. It's a derogatory term that the right uses, but the business community is about job creation. They're about having people prepare. We did our show at University of Wisconsin Milwaukee about a month ago or so, and folks down there are so integrated in both the business community and making opportunities, although they don't use the term DEI, of course, but about having opportunities for folks from all different backgrounds, because they're like, it makes Milwaukee better. Talk to us about, do you think that Republicans are going to find some sort of compromise with you folks on the Democratic side to get more funding for our UW system?
I mean, I hope so, because our universities have been cut and cut and cut for 15 years as costs have been going up. And that is not sustainable. No matter who you are, Todd, or where you're from in the state, if you're willing to do the work and you want to go to college, that should be a pathway for you. That is what our public universities are for, so that we're not leaving anybody behind just because their parents weren't rich enough or they didn't come from the right zip code, right? And if we want our public universities to succeed, we have got to fund them. I mean, I'm a small business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. And I was just touring an incredible small business in Janesville this morning. About 300 jobs. They are working literally on solving the energy problem, on nuclear fission, one of the most incredible potential opportunities. And by the way, along the way, they're detecting and helping to treat cancer. Wow. So this is a company founded by a UW PhD in nuclear physics. He hires UW graduates. He hires people from the technical colleges. He said if it weren't for that, his business couldn't be here. And if we want businesses like that create good paying jobs for their communities, we have got to be funding the universities of Wisconsin.
As you travel around the state, I was up in the Green Bay area this weekend, and there's a strong tech program in that part of the state, as there is across. I still believe that our tech universities, colleges have a vital role in this state, but it seems to me that politically speaking, that those two entities have been pitted against itself, that the Republicans have basically said, oh, you don't need a liberal arts degree, a 4-year degree. You can just go to the tech schools. It would seem to me that our 4-year graduate programs are vital, particularly in the STEM areas of engineering and building a new engineering school here at Madison. But how do we get rid of the partisanship, Senator, and focus on the true needs of us all Wisconsinites and providing educational opportunities for everyone?
I think those kind of divide and conquer arguments, I mean, my God, those are like a generation out of date. We need to be thinking about how can we help everyone thrive? How can we have a productive economy in a world that is dominated for good or ill by AI? How can we equip people to do work that is meaningful for them and lets them support their families while still having time with their family and being able to live in a community where they can afford housing, right? Like these are the big problems that we need to be tackling. And the idea that we're going to be pitting some forms of education against others, I just think is so ridiculous. Like we don't have the luxury of arguing over this nonsense that Republicans want to keep us mired in the past. We have to think about what is the vision for the future and how are we going to help make sure that the next generation is able to thrive and access that part of the American dream of wanting your kids to live in a better world than we did. Because right now, our kids are not getting that from us.
If you ruled the world, one of my former bosses likes to say, if you were the committee co-chair or if you were governor and could write it in your own vernacular, what do you think the best path forward is for, I'll still call it the University of Wisconsin system, recognizing there are new challenges, but how do we still fund them to keep it viable? The Wisconsin idea that the borders of our state are the borders of our university.
I think we make a real public commitment to funding the university, but also keeping our hands off it. One of the problems that our universities have had is that the legislature wants to control who gets to teach, what books the students are able to read. Can they build a new dorm? To me, that is crazy. No other Big Ten university operates under those kind of antiquated constraints. So I want to listen to and learn from the smartest people, whether it's in physics, whether it's in engineering, whether it's in healthcare. I also think, when we think about a new technology-driven future, the humanities become even more important, right? The ability to communicate with each other, the ability to be creative in your thinking and strategic, things that AI can't really do well, right? We have got to, figure out what it is that is special about humans and be investing in that. And higher ed helps us do that.
I'm calling it audible, so I apologize. We're going to be talking with Wisconsin Watch here in the next hour. One of the stories by Tom Kircher, he's going to be our guest, is entitled Bipartisan Support Builds for Studying Nuclear Power in Wisconsin. It's SB 125, introduced back in March, which will require the State Public Service Commission, which regulates electric and gas utilities in Wisconsin, to conduct a nuclear power siting study. Feelings, thoughts?
Well, I think that nuclear certainly can be part of the mix, and it is worth studying. I don't know that the state should be paying for that. I mean, generally, it is the power companies that are supposed to pay for those kind of studies. And, that if the legislature thinks it's a worthy idea, and it certainly may well be, then they should have included some staffing and some funding for it. Because we can't just keep asking the PSC to do more with less.
All this comes down to the dollar sign, right?
Sure does, Todd.
State Senator Kelda Roys, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate you as always. We'll talk to you next week. Find out maybe the Howard Marks line has called a meeting. How about that?
Love it.
All right. Thank you very much.